My final year in architecture, I'm a struggling actor. I'm sneaking out of school to go on audition. And if you remember, I failed my final year. I had to have a carryover. I didn't like the roles I was getting, so I said I'd write myself roles. And that's when I now linked up with
Okay.
KraksTV. I did a lot of horror material. We have stuff like Basic. Basic was like crowning jewel of that era for me.
Does an editor actually see a final cut before it is being shot? If that makes sense.
Good editor does. It's just names we're calling ourselves so that we have something to write on paper. We are all just making films. Whatever needs to be done to get the job done, we do. There was one time I will never forget. It was this guy, Ni Akimolayan, and in one of his blog posts, he put out a screenwriting competition. And I'm on my bed, and that's when this whole world opened up for me. If you're going to tell a story like your last story, you can't make the mistake of trying to write it in 3-4 months. The person that's going to actually kill that story, they started working on it already. Let me actually drop this bit of tea here. I hope it doesn't cause any controversy.
Just a quick message before we dive into today's episode. I found something interesting in our data, which showed that only about 25% of our viewers are actually subscribed to the channel. If you've been enjoying the content that we're creating, if you've been finding it exciting or learning something new, I have a little favor to ask of you. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, as it goes a long way in helping us deliver more exciting episodes like this and create more valuable content. You're amazing.
Hi everyone, my name is Mo, and this is the Hungry Creative Podcast, and we're here for another interesting conversation. Another guest who has done work in the film industry, is a creative, and I'm so excited to have him on the session today. I think he's going to bring so much insight and so much about his journey, about his story as well. So without any delay, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest today, Shola, also known as Ghost, but most people know him as Adesola. Actually, your name is Ade. Ade, you're naughty little.
Ade, our naughty little brother. Yes.
Naughty little bro. Yeah. Does anybody actually call that whole thing?
So, as the people that call it, we know ourselves. It is an ode to something. No, it's an ode to something very, very real. Like it's a testament to like a certain childhood orientation. People that recognize the name, I know what kind of childhood they had.
Yeah.
Because Ade, our naughty little brother, was one of our reading materials that year in primary school, like primary 1, primary 2. We all like if you went to like a federal primary school, you read Ade, our naughty little brother.
Yeah.
It was one of those books.
Are you trying to say?
Wait, like the same as Ali and Simbi, all them books. Ade, our naughty little brother was one of them. So anybody that clocks on it, I know that my guy, I know you, we know ourselves.
Oh,
anybody that doesn't, I get it also.
Segregation. Well, yeah, man, it's nice to have you on the session.
Glad to be here, man.
I
the
think,
hungry creative.
yeah, man.
It sums it up.
Yeah. Right. So just thinking about it again, like I was making a point about, like way back in uni, who'd have thought like, you'd be landing in like something as like a career path as streamlined as, film. I didn't see it really. Nobody even saw it. Like I didn't even see myself even also doing like most of the things I'm doing now. But I think it just speaks about like that's like evolving and how life eventually just pans out somehow. Like if you try to connect some things that you're doing then and now, probably makes sense. But I think there's still some story right behind all that. So I think that story is what we'd love to hear. How you kind of discovered your passion in film. How you landed in this position where you are like in this career path.
I feel like my own story is not typical like that. I feel like everybody that knew me then, if you were to have a guess, it would have probably been that I would be doing something in film. Like you said, like back then, anybody that saw me in the studio working, I'm watching something. I've always been about that. Or I'm reading a book. It's always about story. And by the way, I think my core identification, even before filmmaker and all of that stuff, is storyteller. I think that's what I identify with that word. So, and even my final year project, it was architecture and whatnot. But what did I design? I designed a film museum. But back then, even like I didn't know that I was going to be on the back end making films and whatnot. I didn't know how I was going to pan out. But I knew that this is one medium that I really like. When I think back at it, it didn't even start there. It's been core. As a kid, I watched a lot of TV. Like, I didn't watch a lot of TV per se because back then you have a limited amount.
Right.
But let me try and paint you this picture. When I was in my teenage years, maybe 14 or 13, we had just gotten my dad had just bought a new TV in the house for the living room. So the old black and white that we used to have, we brought it into the kids' room. And then
Okay.
it was even actually I'm joining two stories together. The black and white story was when I was much younger, not my teenage years. In our room, we had upgraded to a color TV, but still that old small box set. It used to be in the living room, but when our bigger TV was bought in the living room, we brought that one into the room. And then this channel, Super Screen had just like come into the networks. And I don't know if you remember back then, but when a new channel comes, what they do is they just play films and cartoons back to back.
True.
Before they even start introducing news and
back.
whatnot, they just put film and cartoons.
Yeah.
So this is the memory.
Yeah.
When the color TV entered the room, that night, me and my sister, we didn't sleep. Stayed up all night. That was the first time I ever did overnight that I recall. And we're just watching back to back. I remember one of the films we watched was me, myself, and Irene, Jim Carrey. We watched it was just a movie, and we did this thing for like 48 hours straight. My mom was pissed. We had just finished school, we were on holiday, so we didn't have to go anywhere. Back to back, bro. During the morning period, they did cartoons, all them I can't remember. But cartoons, then in the afternoon period, now transitioned into films, and that was what we did for 48 hours. So that was call me. Before any of this, I was into film. And then as a kid, I acted on stage dramas in church and whatnot. You know, churches do that stuff. So I was, and I
were you a church boy?
I think everybody that grew up in Lagos and grew up Christian was a church.
Speak for yourself, bruv.
Okay, fine. Sorry, but like core is your parents are church going. So like sending kids to church was some way to engage them that year. Like instead of having them at home being nuisances, we are going for Sunday school. Yeah. Go for Saturday service, home fellowship. So I did all of that. And I like my own participation was choir and acting. Whenever it was the Christmas period, when the kids would put on a performance, a recital, I was doing acting. That was it. And this is up until adulthood actually, because after I stopped being a child and after I becoming an instructor, I would write the theater that we would do in church, and I'll work with the kids. So I always did that. So you see, it's not so out of place. I've always been into stories and entertainment.
Interesting.
Do you get it? So when I was in uni, when I actually started trying to be a part of this, it came from loving it so much and being a little bit frustrated with the kind of acting that I was seeing from Nollywood. I love Hollywood films, okay? And I'm not even sorry to say it. People want to come for you that how you in the industry. I'm not sorry to say it. Sorry. I love Hollywood film, and Hollywood films stress me. They always have. So back then, it was stressing me out that I thought the problem was the acting. Do you get? So I'm like, but like Hollywood, why are you being so dramatic in this role when you don't have to be? If I was cast in that role, this is how I would have played it. Do you get? So I started seeing myself in these roles, and then it now got to be that living life. I like processing things that I was experiencing as though I was a character. I was playing the character. Yeah. So I might not say it, but in my head, I would retort with a cool line, or I would observe a situation and I'll fix myself in that situation, and just imagination as a kid now. You know that game you say Kanipe. You know, like Lagos, you say Kanipe I'm this, and then Kanipe you do this. You like role playing and whatnot. That was me. That was a core memory. Yeah. I played with my siblings and kids around. We did a lot of Kanipe. That was it. So I'm thinking like I can do this. So I now said, all right, I'm going to start acting. I'm going to be portraying the roles that I want to see, that I feel like, and that's how I got into the circuit. And this was around like year 3, year 4, fourth year in uni, final year, studying architecture. At that point, I already got the sense that I felt a bit trapped. Even I got the sense I didn't want to be an architect. I'm not enjoying this. Like after I went for the
I was gonna ask.
after
But how did you? So with all that, how did you now land in architecture? Like,
as
yeah,
at the
no
time that
honest.
I was,
How did you
look
land?
back then, you cannot tell you after you finish secondary school. Actor, I want to be an actor is not
Quite hard.
what you tell your parents. I want to go and do
it's
theater
like
art.
career path.
Not
So
when you are
mainstream.
excelling at, like I was in secondary school, senior secondary, I was in science, not art. So I didn't get to now say for uni, I want to go to art or theater. That wasn't, I was on the track for sciences. And even though my physics was weak, my mathematics was really strong, and my technical drawing was really strong, and my fine arts was really strong. So my dad looked at all of that. I still remember, I was like, that means you would enjoy architecture. Okay, it was time to fill in. It was time to fill in the submission form.
That
I just architecture. I didn't have any other interest. I didn't have anything calling me to some other direction. So if this is the next step for my education, what I have to do, I just did it. And then I entered into architecture, and I guess luckily I was able to, if I have to do something, by putting a certain amount of effort into it, I would have a certain amount of excel to come out of it. Like, I'm able to just coast, sort of. So I essentially was coasting. The first time I think I remember putting an effort to do something was to start an acting career, where I actually put in an effort. And that's when I now started feeling what rejection and failure felt like. But up until then, architecture was, okay, this is what I'm doing, I'll coast through it. Because of me, I wouldn't look, if I wasn't me, I probably would have been failing woefully. But like coasting, I was able to just be that average, just that 2-1, 2-2, not excelling, not failing, just there, coasting.
I mean, now that you mention it, it makes sense now. Like, remembering, if I remember everything correctly, you reading and watching movies back to back. I don't think anybody that I know, like the sheer number of movies and shows that you've watched, I don't know anybody. That's just me. I don't know anybody that can match.
I don't know anybody too.
But
I mean, in my career now, I've met some people that would, like we are a breed, but then we exist. I'm not a unicorn.
Wow.
We're there. And then there's people that I look at them and like, okay, these people have even more knowledge on this thing. Like they've seen more films, they have all of that. But yeah, I would be sketching architecture, designing. On the corner of my screen, BLC was playing something. There was like my way of surviving this thing I didn't want to do.
I remember vividly. Yeah, you always had earphones. Always had earphones. Always.
If I didn't have that, I might have broken.
Yeah.
That was what helped me coast.
So now, like talking about like film now, like so that's an interesting and it's for me. I think I'm coming across film even very late. I mean, or like should I say video? Because I recently started
I really think
content.
you should say video. This is a personal thing with me, and people might come for me for saying this, but I think like we use the word film too loosely these days.
No, I don't use the word film. It's because you mentioned film that I started using film.
Maybe not you, but I feel like a bunch of
Okay.
people, you shoot a bunch of really nice cinematic B-rolls, like clips, and put like some nice music behind it and cut it to the nice beat and put it, and it looks nice and cinematic, and the caption will be like cinematic film. Like, no, it's a nice video, it's a cinematic video, but it's not a film. I feel like we have a lot of.
So what qualifies
something for being a film?
What qualifies something to be a film?
I mean, I'm going to sound like an old head type person, but I think a story structure. Do you get? A story has to have been communicated through the medium of film for it to be a film. There's a difference, like there has to be. I'm going to start sounding kind of like Martin Scorsese when he says Marvel movies are not film, they're not cinema, they're just like theme parks. That's Martin Scorsese. I don't totally agree. I think there have been some really nice cinematic Marvel films, but I get where he's coming from, because that's kind of where I'm coming from when it comes to the distinction between content creation, video production, and film. I feel like film has a very like you can critically analyze film because there is the framework of the history of film, the origin, and the just like you have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you have like the different criterias that we use to judge and critique film. But video creation, content creation, you don't really have that. It's a different scope. So that means there should be two different things, and you should be able to make the distinction and say, okay, this is film, this is content. But like a lot of times you have to.
So you think that people put them together side by side or together
Since-
as they qualify them as
Yeah, I think Instagram
the few
did that.
occasions
I think
where
social media, that's one of the things social media did.
Mm.
You know, it gave a lot of, as rappers, they say, okay, I don't want to say like that because it makes it seem like I'm coming for them, but I'm not. You know, that this line say social media is giving cowards an outlet. I'm not saying they're cowards. I'm just saying like you've put together nice content and it's great content, but it's not film.
Yeah.
And when you don't call it film, you kind of sound snobbish, but you're not really snobbish. You're just calling it spade.
So when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned like you, I think you said you tried your hands on something relating to like writing or something.
yeah, I did finish
then
that story.
You now started, you realized, yeah, you did finish that story. Okay, so can you tell us how you discovered film, like how you ended up, being a film producer or creative creative entrepreneur, like you said?
It all works. So, like you have rightly said, right? As at my final year in architecture, I'm a struggling actor. I'm sneaking out of school to go on audition, which is something not a lot of people know. I'm sneaking out of school to go on audition, trying to get a role.
I didn't know that.
For all the roles I got were not big roles, and the story, that's when I now realized that the core of the issue that I was blaming the whole of the industry for, it wasn't just acting. I mean, the scripts that I was getting access to on my level were everything that we see that we all complain about in Nollywood. Overly dramatized, not a strong story structure. It was, I wasn't enjoying it. And then there was one time I will never forget. It was this guy, Ni Akimolayo. He's one of the big names in Nollywood right now. He did Wedding Party. He done like a bunch of epics. Really big name. But back then, he had just done The Heritage. Oh no, not The Heritage. The Arbitration. And Arbitration was one of those films that actually took Nollywood from one level to the next level, to this new era of Nollywood, where we are actually trying to tell great stories. And he was like, he had just come out, he's doing things, trying things. He had started a blog, and in one of his blog posts, he put out a screenwriting competition. It was like, okay, I have some funding. I'm gonna make like 10 films, short films. So my loyal blog followers, and I was a loyal blog of Nia. Like, if not for Nia, I'm not gonna be on the path I'm in right now. So he's the one that got me to actually go, okay, how do you write a script? Because if you are doing a competition for this big shot, you are not going to want to just use a Microsoft Word script that you just wrote. He was very clear about that that's not a script. Figure out how to write a script, right? So that's the first time I did the research into it. I'll never forget, I was in Erasmus, Masters 1, first year of Masters, right? And I'm on my bed, and that's when this whole world opened up for me. I was like, oh, so it's a thing. It's not just like, oh, I want to tell a story, I have a story, canopy, and just write it on Microsoft Word. No. Screenwriting is actually a career. People go to school, you can actually get a whole master's degree in this thing. And I was like, I think that was the first time I was like, okay, I can seriously do this thing. It's not just a hobby. I can actually specialize and have credentials and work in this industry because this is what it takes. This is the back end. And that was my first step into it.
Right.
And I now actualized, and I was like, I am a screenwriter. Back then, I had business cards made that said I was a screenwriter. I wasn't trying to do anything else but be a screenwriter. I'm writing stories. So I submitted a script for the thing. It didn't get picked, but it did what it needed to do for my career. That was when I knew that this was what I'm doing, and all I did was write scripts. I said I'm going to be the best version of this era of me. So I would write scripts. I literally did not go for some lectures because I was in the middle of creating a story, and I'm feeling like I don't want to like break the streak. That was where I was at. And if you remember, I failed my final year. I had to have a carryover. I'm not going to blame this. I don't think it was about this. I think it was about realizing that I have no interest in this, and this is where I have my interest in. So I didn't expect, like, the failure was not like, oh, I tried and then I failed. It was, I stopped trying. And so I deserved the F that I got in the studio that year. But I felt like I got an A in screenwriting, so I wasn't mad about it. And this was when I started the shift. And funny enough, there was never this moment where it was like, oh, I'm so misunderstood. I feel trapped in this when I want to do this. For my story, it was very organic. When I realized this is what I was doing, I started doing a lot of writing and I tried to make something. Remember, I had the background of doing theater in church. So I knew what it took to like write dialogue, recite it. So at that time, I put a band of like guys together. I said, I've written something, I'm gonna cast you guys, let's make it work. And it was like, do you remember Solomon from it was like a year below us. Solomon was friends with Femi Bakri. If you recognize the name, that's the CEO of KraksTV.
Of course.
And Femi was trying to take KraksTV in a different direction from just posting other people's content. Wanted to start doing original stuff. So I think Solomon mentioned that I got a meeting, I pulled up at the Kraks office that year, and we had a conversation, ideas that we could do for original content. Because I'm out here trying to greenlight, like create web series, because that was the era of Ndani TV where web series were a thing. So I was trying to launch a web series. That's what I cast all these guys for there. We couldn't do it. I'm bringing it to KraksTV. I'm like, oh, I have this script for web series, skit, all of this. And like, can you write scripts? Yeah, I can write comedy scripts, no problem. Like, please pull up. So I was just like friendly with the Kraks family. It's not like I was in there like that, but I pull up to the office, write stuff, and like kind of talk their production team into doing it. Until that thing now became a pretty permanent and pretty structured relationship where I was with KraksTV for like a year. In fact, for like 2 years. First, the final year of masters, and then 1 year after that, throughout my NYSC, I was working at Kraks, creating skits. Man, I did so much comedy. Comedy was coming out of my nose. I did so much comedy in Kraks that by the time I was done with my NYSC, I was also done with comedy. I couldn't do one. I was done with comedy, like writing and creating comedy. I said I couldn't do this thing one more. I told myself, I was like, I cannot write one more comedic content. I'm done. And that now entered me. I made friends with Tolani, and Tolani Ajayi, she's a dentist and a filmmaker in her own right. We met when we're in the same era, where we're discovering filmmaking and with our passion. So at the time, she was doing this horror series, Bloody Valentine, where she would create some video content or some content themed around a dark spin on Val's Day. So that's when I met her. I was frustrated with comedy. So I leaned into that 100%. And that sparked this really dark era in my filmmaking journey, where I created like some really dark pieces. I've done some stuff on suicide. I've done some stuff on just horror. And now, like, even to this day, a lot of people in the independent film space, they think I'm a horror filmmaker. Like, they attribute that. They think that's my genre.
When you be referencing, I was gonna touch on that as well.
They think that's my genre. And personally,
I've seen some of your interviews.
Yeah, right.
I've seen some of your interviews where, so like you keep referencing that guy, When you keep referencing that guy, and then you see some of your things you've done, some of the things you've done, and you see like similarities in like the darkness.
Yeah, so that was. I think that was how I splashed into the scene. Because when I linked up with Tony, I wrote Basic. And even though I didn't make Basic immediately, I wrote it. I released some pretty dark material that era. And I know that I was an influence because we became really good friends, me and Tolani. So I would hang out at our spot, Tolani and Miko's house, and we would just ideate and create stuff together. She came up with Scriptathon, which was like a screenwriting community. Remember, I was still primarily a screenwriter then. A screenwriting community where we're just writing screenplays and developing as screenwriters. So I did a lot of horror material, watched a lot of horror films. So that influenced a line of work that was jaded, dystopian, dark, and horror. You have stuff like Basic. Basic was like the crowning jewel of that era for me. You have Synopsis, you have Monster in Law, Off the Air, all those shorts that are about tackle dark thoughts, suicide, unaliving things. Yeah, that was from that era.
I have one question to
All
ask
right.
you, and I know this is a question that you'll be able to. You probably laugh at it, but you understand where I'm
Ask
coming from. What has been the reception of this? And the reception, I mean, in two ways. First, from the African dad or the African mother family, you know, the African orientation towards this kind of style, and then towards and then maybe on a general note, can you give us more context? So what was it like when you told your parents that you were shooting a horror movie?
I didn't tell my parents I was shooting. So that's the beauty of my relationship with my parents, I guess, or just my upbringing.
Okay.
When I got, we never had the, oh, I'm doing this in my life now, what should I do type relationship. At least not for me.
Okay.
From when I got the independence of living in hostel, that during uni, that was kind of where the separation started, and I got to stand alone. So as long as I wasn't a riffraff and I wasn't there was no alarm from my lifestyle where they needed to gather and actually say, what are you doing with your life? As long as that was all the processes were moving. After master, I finished my uni. I didn't just one hiccup with the extra. After that, NYSC. After that, I got a job. What is the job you are doing? Meanwhile, while I was doing while I was doing crafts and all of that, I still kept up the fund of architecture for as long as I could. I worked in architecture firms. I started my own practice. So I had that to hide behind. I had my practice for like 3 years. Did you get? And I needed to have my practice because that was the only way I could function in an architecture capacity while being invested in film. Because if I was actually working for another person's practice doing a 9 to 5, I wouldn't have been able to be flexible enough to actually develop in this part. So I had to start my own practice, have like 2 or 3 clients that I serviced that kept the lights on. Do you get? And there was like, okay, my son is an architect. This is what he does. So I had the freedom to do all this. Although I had that with my sister, my older sister, who isn't really that much older than me. It's just 1 year. But she allowed herself as like my oldest sister. She would still introduce me as a baby brother. I got that from her.
I remember your sister.
She pulled up in the studio that year, right? Yeah. So I got that.
Where's Shola?
Extra, but it's what it is.
Everybody, I think every single creative, that's one skill that every single creative needs to have. Being able to deal with rejection, being able to manage critique, people criticizing work, constructive or non-constructive, it just comes.
Most definitely, especially with the kind of background we have over here. And it's funny, this is actually something I was reflecting on recently. Our background actually instills a lot of insecurity in us as like when we become adults, just from the culture, just from a cultural point of view. And something that I remember thinking about, like, it's going to seem random, but like whistling. I remember as a kid when I learned, because we're not born knowing how to whistle. Something is we learn like in our formative years. I remember when I learned it. My older sister learned it before me. A couple days later, I learned it, and I remember really enjoying whistling that era, that period. But my mom, that was when she told us the story of if you whistle at night, snakes will come into the house and bite you. There's a superstition, right? But I remember from that moment on, the idea of whistling was taboo, kind of like it was the wrong thing to do. And even as much as I had a rebellious streak about me, I didn't feel comfortable whistling. Till this day, even when I'm whistling and having a good time whistling, there's a part of me that feels like I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm doing something I should not be doing. I'm being loud by whistling, as opposed to this thing being like an expression of joy and whatnot. And I remember thinking, like, why? What
Exactly.
was the motivation for her saying that? Like my mom, I mean,
Hmm.
she didn't do it out of spite. It wasn't like she was trying to scam me or that. No, it was genuine or bringing probably. Well, we're making a lot of noise and being like nuisances, and she's trying to control us so we don't go off to nuisances, right? So I think my upbringing had a very big impact on how I handled rejection or my fear of rejection in the initial days. So I had fears, and maybe I didn't process it in the healthiest way, but I didn't let that stop me. And it was more of a combative thing, where now this is where the trauma comes in, being kind of toxic, right? Because I have a thing where before you reject me, I'll reject you.
Let's go band
Bank
for
of
band.
So part of my dealing with those rejections I got from festivals and whatnot, part of my rationalizing is not just saying, oh, they got other. It was also saying things like, okay, there's some, okay, like Amma now, me thinking, okay, it's because of they had so much like anti-government and God. It probably wasn't that, but it was me saying, okay, they're probably too political. Like it's too political for them, so they're trying to be. Do you get? They're trying to be.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they
Yeah.
didn't pick it. But they have an issue. They don't
Controversial.
want to be
Yeah.
controversial. But that was just my trauma
Mm-hmm.
response of, oh, you
Your
want to
own
reject me?
rationalization
Well, it's because
for
you have an issue, so
yeah.
I reject you. I don't even want your shit anyway. Types. Do you get?
This gives me joy because this was how I coped with architecture school. There's an interview you did that you were someone asked you about like um would you I think the person was asking like would you produce a movie or something or would you do a film and then you were like
Oh,
I can't remember
the
maybe I'm
Fela
paraphrasing
biopic.
but the person said something around
The
like
Fela biopic.
yeah yeah you said it was about Fela ahead the person said yeah I remember it was an interview you did at a radio station if I'm correct and then the person was like
Who would like to do Fela's story?
Me.
Beautiful. Why
If
not
you,
start
if
this?
who said about start now?
I'm a Latin into brother.
No, like story like Fela's story, like
Okay.
aha that's it
I think
that's
if you're
it
going to tell a story like Fela's story, you can't make the mistake of trying to write it in 3 to 4 months. Like the person that is going to actually kill that story, they started working on it already. Do you get? And I've been opportune to actually take a
that would be a blockbuster man
if
if
it's
it's done
done
well.
well. I mean, we've already had a snippet of it with the Formula and Spaghetti story that was done. Like we know the potential of that story. I'm sure. Like if Jay-Z in LA can hear about the story and actually tell the story because they did a theatrical production of it, then clearly the value of that story is everybody's very out of it.
What about film interests you so much? Why are you so passionate about it? Why are you so invested into film?
Film for me, what got me into film and got me so hooked on it is it was an escape from my reality. Not to say like my reality was
Right.
so like adventure terrible that I needed an escape. No, I was fine. I had a wonderful upbringing, but it was still an escape. It was me seeing this world that was larger than my. It was the rest of the world. I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. That was the extent of my physical. But film took me far beyond all of that. I went to Paris, I went to LA, Italy, in all these different films, and I got to experience those culture and those different story points. So that's what film was for me. Like the first question you asked me, which was, "What's your journey
Yeah.
and how you became the filmmaker you are?" I don't think I fully answered that still. I said I started out trying to be an actor,
Okay.
but then that's where it ended, and then I became a writer, right?
Mhm.
Because I didn't get any real roles. But I don't think I really did get to becoming a director, an editor, a producer, and all these other roles that I've carried on in my career. Okay, let me actually drop this bit of tea here. I hope it doesn't cause any controversy. I started out as an actor.
Yeah.
I didn't like the roles I was getting, so I said I'd write myself roles. And that's when I now linked up with
Okay.
KraksTV. I was working as a writer, a creative
Yeah.
writer. Then this I pitched a short film. Let me write this short film, let's make it. I pitched it, but I wasn't a director at the time, I was just a writer, right? So Femi at the time said we need to get, like, if I want to put money into this, let's get people that will do it right. So we got an outside producer, which was Fumi Ogini. She's a big time producer now. Like some of her films, we all know, Nollywood. And our very own Mike Afolarin, who is currently blowing up. Mike is in everything right now. But back then, like, that's my set. We have the Faithful Means and the Mike Afolarin. So at the time, that script was given to Mike to direct, and he did a wonderful job directing it. It's an interview story. It's on YouTube. He starred himself in it. An interview story on YouTube. That was like one of the first short films I ever made. I wrote, but personally, I don't like it. I've never told like this because I think he did a fine job for where we were all at. But the story I felt I wrote was not necessarily the film that was made. I personally felt that the
I
film
see.
was like a Nollywood film. And that's not to say it was a bad film. I'm not, but it was like everything we come to expect from Nollywood. I felt like the film was made, and I didn't write it
Okay.
to be that. I wrote it in my head thinking it was going closer to like this other short film I saw that was made uh in the Hollywood space, right? So that's, and then the I felt like, yo, I didn't like the fact that I wrote this and it became this. So that's when I said, okay, going forward, I'll start trying to direct what I wrote because I have the vision.
Got
So,
you.
and then I
Yeah.
was a student of Quentin Tarantino, who is a writer director. So the idea of seeing written and directed by Adesola Oni was peak for me. So that's what got me into
Right.
directing. And
Yeah.
I now directing stuff. And funny enough, the core reason for me getting into this was so that I can act. I could give myself roles. But being the writer and now directing, I wasn't able to direct and act. I wasn't able to direct myself
Right.
as
And
the lead.
act.
So I never gave myself the lead
Yeah.
roles in my production. I cast and I'll
Right.
just give myself a cameo like Quentin did.
Right.
That's how much of I'm a
Yeah.
big Quentin Tarantino fan. Quentin would give himself just like cameo roles or minor roles. So that's
Yeah.
what I now did. So most of my films where I also acted in, they were all very minor roles. Never anything big. I've not had my acting debut or breakout yet. But then that's what now solidifies me as a director.
I have a question, and I'll ask this because I'm getting into the groove of this editor shenanigans. Does an editor actually direct from an editor's point of view? I hope that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
for example, you are an editor. I don't know the frameworks for editing. I'm not an editor. I consider myself just a creative that tries out different things, even though I've edited a few videos. But on that level, does an editor actually see a final cut before it is being shot? If that makes
A
sense.
good editor does.
I know there's a director. Director is there, right? The director directs the shoots how he envisions it, right? Correct? Okay.
You
Now,
say that.
does an editor, is there a place for an editor where the shoot is actually going
Yes.
on? Interesting.
Because there are some transitions, mostly with the transitions, I would say, that if you are not the person that is going to work on that transition in post production, yeah,
Hmm.
you will not 100% know
You've-
if you've gotten it right or wrong.
No. Okay.
A director can
that's
even
on
plan
point.
the transition. If the editor doesn't understand that
Yeah.
transition, it's not going to come out.
The intention.
So having the editor on
It's
set,
not gonna come out.
I'm using transition as an
Yeah.
example. There's a lot of other things where
Example.
the editor,
Right.
the input of the editor is necessary before it gets to post production. Even just some rules, some visual rules of editing that you do not know is necessary until you get it wrong. Like the 180-degree rule, where your camera should be on this side of the 180 of the line for both. If you are doing an over the shoulder, your camera has to be on this side so that you're filming everybody. And if you take it to the other side, it becomes jarring instantly when you're watching a dialogue because
Okay.
you're talking this way, but
Right.
then the next one is like it's switching to this side.
Off.
The brain doesn't
Right.
connect it right, but the editor knows that, and the director should know that, and the cinematographer
Right.
should know that. Everybody should know that. But that's something that an editor can call you out on set, and an editor sees because of their editor that a cinematographer might not see, or a director might not see, or
Wow.
even the writer might not see, right?
Whoa.
So if I'm supposed to break it
Whoa.
down, kind of like, I would say, obviously, every role is very critical and important if it is to be done right.
Mm.
Like, nobody can take
Yeah.
ownership and say, without me, this film is not a good film. No one person can.
Yeah.
Everybody can brag and say it, but they won't be right. The writer will come and say, hey, nothing starts without the script. So if I didn't write this story, like, this film is never going to happen. And that is very, very right and very, very true. But if the director was not the hot shit that the director was, it wouldn't be what it was too. If the DP wasn't that, if the AD wasn't, if the line producer is not the hot shit that they were, you don't get the film you have. It's as simple as that. So also the editor. So if you want now to put it in terms of roles and whatnot, like I was saying earlier, the writer is like the architect. He's drawing up the blueprint, and nothing happens without the blueprint. You come as long as it is well written. The spark, the initial story idea came from this brainbook. Even if it was a producer that had the story idea, because sometimes you have that, the owners of the film, the producer, I got a film idea, I want us to do this. You are going to you have to make sure the writer understands that idea, because they will take your idea,
Mm.
digest it, put their spin on it,
Yeah.
and make it into a good film. Write it into a good film.
Mm.
Then the producer, in the way it usually works, the producer now gets the script. They have the script they like, dialogue, everything. They now have to find the right director who can interpret that script visually and make it into a very, very, like, compelling visual story. A compelling visual story is not the same as a literal story, because literal stories, you can read thought processes, you can read subtext and context, because they will write it out. But visually, you can't see context or subtext or thoughts and emotions, so you have to now visually interpret all of that. And only a
Makes
direct,
sense.
like, that's where the job of the director really comes in, I feel. Because if everybody else does their job right, on production day, the director doesn't necessarily need to, like, exert himself. So some people even say there is no role, that, like, director is just a decorative role on production day. I get why they will say that. It's not true, but I get why you will say that, because if you have a professional actor who has gotten the script, who understands like, has broken it down, then the actor should be able to do his job and deliver the lines, and the director should not have to say, cut, take that again, do it this way. If you have a DP who has digested the script and understands the emotion that the scene is supposed to be, the DP already knows how to frame and light that is communicating that emotion. The director shouldn't have to say, give me softer light, I want it to feel like this. Because it's the DP that usually will say, I want to give it this light so that we have this emotion. You know, the script says this. More often than not, it's the DP and the cinematographer that is telling the director what to do. Sometimes the actor saying, I feel I should do this to send this emotion, and you're telling the director, and the director is just like, okay, sure, yeah, yeah. So you can actually have a director that doesn't know what he's doing make a great film, because
Whoa.
everybody else was great and superb at their job.
Does that come from a place of ownership? I mean, that I feel like that I can understand that. Does that come from a place of ownership? Because if I see a lot of combination of the writer and directed by,
Written and directed.
when I see like the movie, I see sorry, written. I see a lot of written and directed by when I see those movie credits and stuff. So when you have those kind of scenarios, is it a function of ownership where the director is not as immersed in the role as, you know,
Kind of like.
if you had
kind of like.
I think
So the general principle in the industry is, you can have a film and then the opening credit says a film by. It can also say written and directed by. And usually those two usually means that the writer, the director wrote it, and that's why he's saying the film is by. But written and directed by, alludes to a certain disconnection where it was just a job. Do you get? You got a writer, the writer wrote the script, then you hired this person to direct it, and so the film was directed by. Sometimes it's not even the same, it's written by one person, directed by another person. That's different from a film by this person. A film by this
Okay.
person, it
Okay.
means that is usually used when the director is taking this body of work as an expression piece. Like, this is my expression to the audience. I wrote it, I had the visual idea for it, I directed it the way I needed it to come. I stood over the editor's shoulder, even though I didn't might not have edited it myself, but it was my the last work I worked on Buried, directed by Ayo Lawson, written by someone else, I forget the name. That was directed by me. It wasn't a film by me
Okay.
because everything that
Okay.
happened in the final product was the director's vision. So that was a film by Ayo Lawson. Even in the editing process, even though I was the editor that clicked and clicked, I was just actualizing her vision. She had a very clear, direct vision of what she wanted. The film was hers. As opposed to
Okay.
Gbese, even though I put written and directed by me, I could have put for Gbese a film by me because that was a
Film
very
by
unique
you.
voice I used to tell that. But the editor, he came to my studio at the time, which was in my house. He sat beside me. I have a picture
Yeah.
of that somewhere. I will share with you if you want to. Where he was editing it and I was right there. I was like, cut here. They can put this here. It was my film. Same thing with No
I see.
Escape. Well, not so much No Escape. No Escape was written by Tonya Chukura, but I directed that. So that one you have I wrote it with Tonya and I directed it. So you have written and directed by me, but also written by Tonya. So that one
Okay.
I could say it's a film by me. Synopsis, which is another short film, that's a film by me, written and directed by me, my visual style, my voice. But off the air, was just directed by me because I was hired to direct it. Same thing with Conversations from the Past. I was hired to direct it. So I think that's a core differentiation. Like when you want to say a
Okay.
film by and written and directed by, there's a differentiation, even though it's more blurred when it comes to cinematography and DOP. In this industry, even abroad, like the lines are low-key blurred, but not really. In Hollywood, the director of photography is usually the director
Okay.
as we see it being used in music videos here. So all these music video directors, they're directors of photography. But it's kind of different from direct a film
Okay.
director, the way I've explained it now. A film director, which is on, but cinematographer and director of photography, those roles are not similar. They're similar, but they're not the same. But the way we use it here, it's pretty much the same role. Then in the end credits, depending on what the editor is feeling like, they will style it DOP this, or they will say cinematographer this. Because usually the same role that the person plays. In the Hollywood scene, it's not the same
Okay.
role. Cinematography is concerned more with lighting and framing on set during production.
Okay.
The director of photography is more of pre-production work where you are creating the visual cards, the mood boards, and you are directing the decisions that the cinematographer implements during production.
I
And even the
see.
cinematographer,
I
don't
see.
mistake him for the gaffer, which is a very cinema role. The cinematographer is the person that, the way I understand it, you can tell me if I'm wrong. Hey, I might be doing it wrong my way or my understanding. Cinematographer is the person that has gotten the direction from the director of photography who created the visual look with the film director. The cinematographer is now on the actualization end of things. We're going to use a nan light to create this depth of field. We're going to use a butterfly light with a diffuser to get this soft lighting here. Do you get? And then the gaffer is the actual person on set that sets up the light and actually puts it and be like, okay, how is it looking? The cinematographer is looking at the camera because it's usually behind the camera. He's looking at it and he's saying, okay, it's a bit too harsh. We need more diffusion on there. We need more intensity in the practical light there to get the film. The director of photography, the DOP, might not even be in the same room, might be in the back room, looking at the screen and saying, okay, yeah, that's what we want. Looking with the director and saying, yeah, this is the picture. This is the picture we want. We created this picture. That's why the director of photography is directing the photography you're seeing. It's all pictures. It's all moving pictures, right? Do you get? So he's working with the director during pre-production to create this visual look. The cinematographer is implementing the vision board, the mood board that has been created by the director and the director of photography. And the gaffer has the technical and the expertise knowledge of setting the light. He knows, okay, you want to get this kind of soft lighting. Okay, we go bounce some off this whiteboard here. He go touch them there like that. That's the gaffer. That's where the gaffer comes in. But on our set, the gaffer is basically just a hired hand. That say, hold the light like this. Okay, boss, I've done it long enough. I know that if you, I go just put on this angle. Then the person we're calling DP of cinematographer is the person you hired that probably has been doing the work long enough, that he told you what the budget for your film set would be, the equipment, all of that. So it comes with the gear, the team. And you say, not the director of photographer or not the cinematographer be that. It's all, I mean, whatever you choose to call, it's just names we're calling ourselves so that we have something to write on paper. We are all just making films. Whatever needs to be done to get the job done,
Right.
we do.
Get done. Wow, what a breakdown. That was a breakdown. I've never actually heard that much detail on how the roles are actually played
And
out.
guess what?
It's
all wrong. I lied. I'm joking. But
if you like, it's not me that will correct. It's not me that will drag you. It's the people that are watching that will drag you. But yeah, that's such an interesting breakdown. Yeah, whatever happens, you deal with it.
I didn't even know I knew this. Like, I don't consider myself knowledgeable.
Well,
I've just done this long enough that despite my best efforts, some things sank and I now know something.
yeah, I'm happy that you were able to share some of your.
I'm very glad I was here.
Should I say your passion and your interest and the things that you're, things that you believe in, and we have a tradition, and we have a tradition of asking this question for every episode that we have, every guest that's come, and that question is, what are you currently doing to become a better version of yourself?
I think a very easy answer I can give. Presently, I'm integrating myself and my processes with AI. That's definitely helping me be a better version of the storyteller that I am. You can't help it. Everybody needs to hop on AI. So that's one thing I'm doing, learning how to phrase prompts, troubleshooting new ways to integrate AI into storytelling and filmmaking. And oh man, the advances that we're making are just insane. I'm excited for it. I didn't think I would be. I was very much team originality and anti-AI before this, but then I'm also very aware that wasn't because of it was my core belief. It was because of a lot of the consumption I was doing. People I was talking to were anti-AI, so I started forming. But I think I'm all for it.
What points? How did you have a turnaround?
It was very organic. Like with all things in my career and my life, it was very organic. It came to me kind of like almost found me.
You found the truth yourself.
No, it comes to find me. Not even that. I don't actively be searching like that because I'm so laid back and satisfied, and like I'm not actively searching, except maybe spiritually where I'm actually trying to find answers. But everything else, because I just have an open disposition, it comes, and then if it is something that I'm into, I latch on. Do you get? So every aspect of even my relationships, it happens, I latch on. It comes to find me. All the jobs I've done, I've tried to be intentional. I've tried to like scheme and maneuver. It doesn't always work out. Like every time I try to intentionally plot and plan things with the means of making like mad bank, never panned out. The thing that brings me my great bank, it comes to find me. A random call, I position myself, I'm doing something without the intention of getting a job out of it. Someone sees that, comes to find me. It just comes my way. So I feel like that is my peak disposition. It's part of my energy and my aura. It is oneness with creation, and then good things find you when you are the way you're supposed to be, mentally, spiritually, that state of mind, and also skill wise. Like if you keep developing yourself, you're open to things like this AI thing. I was not planning to do it, but I did a project. The person I collaborated with was talking about working with AI. I dismissed it. I was like, enough. I like doing my thing every time. I'm working on, but then I'm now coming up with problems. And the only solutions or the easy solutions are AI engines, like cleaning up audio or subtitling videos. So just to get my project, a client job done, I go to CapCut. I use the captions generation AI, and I said, oh, so is this easy to subtitle? We're going forward. We're going to keep doing this. I have bad audio. To clean it, normally you have to use all these different effects on Premiere Pro. Just take it to podcast.ai and it cleans up the audio completely. I'm like, well, I'm definitely not going to go through that stress again. So those are the way I now started using AI. Most recently with video generation, 2 Minute Docs just partnered with Cocoa House to release this content, Untold Afrobeat Stories, where we have Afrobeat legends, movers and shakers in the Afrobeat industry. They tell stories that they've experienced in the industry. Cool stories, great stories, just tell it to us. And then we visualize it using AI engines and release it as a 2 minute story or documentary. So, and this is like presently the place where I'm using a lot of AI in the generation of those visuals. So you see, very organic. I didn't skim it, it just came to me. Collaborating with Cocoa House, that's Kolako Oladapo. Yeah, that's his baby, that's his initiative, Cocoa House. So we're doing that together with 2 Minute Dogs. Also doing some other documentary projects and a lot of my screenwriting now. Like the first, what AI has helped me do in my writing, it has eliminated the need for a first draft, which is hard. Any writer would tell you the hardest part of writing is the first draft. That can take you 5 years. The third to fifth draft can happen within the space of a year. But that first draft, AI has eliminated that. As long as I have a full story fleshed out, I just have AI engine generate a first draft script. So I now start editing that and making it into what I want it to be. Cutting my time, my creating time from 5 years to like I can finish a screenplay, a feature film if I'm really motivated and the money is good, 6 months, and it'll be that good. With eliminating plot holes, plot point, like it'll be that good, and all glory to AI, man. My name is Adesola Oni. I'm a filmmaker and a video professional living and working in Lagos, Nigeria, and you have been tuned in to the Hungry Creative Podcast.